Where do we start? What are the sources telling us?
Well, they seem to circle around this idea of not being concerned. Merriam-Webster, for instance, talks about lighthearted unconcern or nonchalance.
Right, nonchalance is a good starting point. And others build on that. Like, Word Genius says, casual lack of concern, indifference. Cambridge uses relaxed and happy way of behaving without feeling worried or guilty.
That relaxed and happy part is interesting. Macmillan adds, not worrying about or paying attention to possible problems.
Yeah.
So, fundamentally, it's about being untroubled. Yeah.
Exactly, untroubled. But, and this is really key, something multiple sources point out, it's not always a good thing. It's got this dual nature.
Like, it can mean carefree, which sounds nice, like just shrugging off small stuff.
But it can also slide into meaning careless or even thoughtless, especially when you're talking about something serious, something that maybe should concern you.
Okay, so there's a judgment potentially baked in.
Yes, precisely. Collins' dictionary really highlights this. It mentions lack of concern shown by someone about something which they might be expected to take more seriously. That's the crucial difference, isn't it, between being easygoing and being, well, dismissive or negligent.
Yeah, it's not just being laid back. The context really matters.
And you see this play out in the examples people use. Like, one source had wandering into the meeting with complete insouciance to the fact that she was late. That's definitely not the positive kind.
No, clearly careless there. But then there's that lovely description of a sheep on a road as an insouciant beast.
Right. That's more playful. It's like attributing a deliberate, almost charming lack of worry to the animal. It works differently.
Or someone snapping back with characteristic insouciance. So what?
Yeah.
That captures that kind of defiant, I don't care attitude.
Yeah. And it pops up in modern contexts, too, like trying to balance serious work with signature TikTok insouciance or talking about audacious insouciance in writing styles.
So it can apply to someone in high office or even an animal's urge. One source mentioned a wild boar getting offended by someone's insouciance. It's a very specific label for a particular kind of detachment.
Now, to really get a handle on this word, the history is super helpful, where it actually comes from.
Okay, let's trace it back. The sources all seem to point towards France.
Yep, straight from French. It's basically lifted directly from the French noun insouciance, and there's the adjective too, insouciant.
And when did it make the jump into English?
Relatively recently, actually, compared to words with really deep English roots. You've got the prefix in, which means not, like inactive or incoherent.
Right, the negative prefix.
And that's stuck onto the verb soucier.
Soucier, what does that mean?
It means to trouble or to disturb or to worry.
So insoucier,
Yeah.
literally not troubled or not worried.
Exactly. It's right there in the word itself. That's kind of the first aha moment, isn't it? The word's structure perfectly matches its meaning, a lack of being troubled. So insouciance, the lack of that solicitous, the lack of that agitation, is fundamentally about not being disturbed. It connects this modern feeling of nonchalance all the way back to these ancient ideas about motion, wholeness, and being troubled.
Wow, that's quite a journey for one word. From maybe setting something whole in motion way back when, to Latin agitation, to French not troubled, ending up as this English word for a specific kind of unconcern.
Now, thinking about how the word actually feels today, our sources picked up on something about how we use it, or maybe don't use it.
Right, you mentioned earlier it's seen more in writing.
Exactly. Far more common on the page than spoken aloud. One source even jokingly called it a fantastically pompous word.
Pompous.
Yeah, and suggested that dropping it into everyday chat might make you sound a bit of a dill, apparently. Which is quite funny.
Though they did sort of contrast that, didn't they? Like maybe chic Parisians can say it in French and sound perfectly natural.
Perhaps. The pronunciations might play a role too.
Okay, let's circle back to that duality we talked about, the carefree versus careless thing, and maybe compare it to similar words.
Concern. Insouciance doesn't necessarily have that happy element.
And they come from different places too, right?
Yeah.
Insouciance from French and Latin, but blithe is Germanic.
Exactly. Different origins, slightly different feel. Someone on that thread suggested a useful distinction. Maybe insouciance is more like, I don't care, whereas blithe could be closer to I don't know, or I'm happy regardless.
That's quite neat. Don't care versus don't know, or happily unaware. And like insouciance, blithe can be negative too, right? Like blithe indifference.
For sure. Or positive, like a blithe spirit. So they both have that potential swing. But going back to the French root for insouciance, that souci, meaning worry or care, really anchors it in the lack of
Some sources link insouciance to philosophy.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? It's quite a leap from someone being late to a meeting.
Totally. So it's a connection.
Well, sources mention it in the context of Hinduism, specifically within certain texts like the Yoga Vasista, which is part of the Purana literature.
Okay.
And here, insouciance isn't seen as, just being lazy or careless. It's framed as a specific state of mind, something potentially cultivated.
A cultivated state. What does that involve?
It's described as a kind of carefree indifference, but specifically towards worldly things like possessions, desires, outcomes, all that stuff.
Right.
And it's supposed to come from a deeper understanding, like realizing that existence and worldly concerns are ultimately transient, fleeting.
So it's detachment, but it's a detachment born out of wisdom, maybe. Not just ignorance or not caring.
That's the idea. Detachment from material worries, aiming for inner peace, inner tranquility. It's like a spiritual spin on being not troubled.
Wow. So it elevates the concept from just an attitude to potentially a profound spiritual or philosophical state.
Exactly. It shows the word has this incredible range from describing someone's slightly annoying lack of punctuality to, a state of enlightened detachment.
So what's the key difference again?
Often, it seems to be the lightness associated with insouciance. Even when it's negative, like carelessness, there's often a sense of it being sort of airy or effortless, rather than weighed down, like apathy might suggest.
Okay, so we've traced it from possibly meaning set in motion to definitely meaning not troubled. We've looked at its French roots, its tricky dual nature, carefree good, careless bad, compared it to blithe, even touched on philosophy. So why should you, listening right now, actually care about understanding this one word, insouciance?
Well, I think it matters because it gives you a really precise tool. It's a label for a specific, quite complex attitude or state of being that you definitely see around you.
Right, we encounter this kind of behavior all the time, but maybe don't have the exact word for it.
Exactly. It's not just a general doesn't care. It captures a particular style or flavor of not caring. Sometimes that style is genuinely charming, effortless, cool, someone who just doesn't sweat the small stuff.
But other times.
Other times, it's infuriating. It's inappropriate, a real failure to give something the attention or seriousness it deserves. Having the word insouciance lets you pinpoint that quality precisely.
So it helps you describe people, situations, maybe even characters in fiction with more accuracy. It sharpens your observation.
And that pretty much wraps up our deep dive into insouciance. Quite a journey for one word.
It really was. From those potential PIE roots about motion and wholeness through Latin agitation, French worry, landing in English with this complex meaning capable of describing a sheep, a latecomer, or even a philosophical ideal.
And exploring that core duality, the carefree side and the careless side, which seems absolutely central to how the word works.
So here's a final thought for you to take away, something to chew on from our discussion today. We live in a world that seems to constantly demand our attention, our concern, our worry, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely feels that way sometimes.
So where does a concept like insouciance fit into that? Is aiming for a bit more insouciance a good thing, a healthy detachment, maybe even a step through its wisdom? Or is it fundamentally risky, always threatening to slide into harmful carelessness or disregard? Where do you think that line falls? When does not troubled become not caring enough? Something to ponder.